Orc, the bardic paladin, who sings and plays again. He tells the tales of glory and weaves a magic story. He'll join you at your table and ask you to share a fable. Heroes of humble origin, villains who must be fought again. No matter their skill or prowess, the people in life are countless. So we pray you heed our request. Enjoy this tale of sidekicks and side quests. And side quests.
And hello, welcome to the first and experimental new format of panel episodes for Sidekicks and SideQuests that we'll be calling Parlays at the Platter. The goal is to invite guests of the podcast who share a similar field of expertise or passion, to invite them to come together and have a lovely hour or so on the topic. I'm joined by three wonderful guests of the podcast to inaugurate this new feature. Those of you at the aristocratic level of patronage on the Patreon will get to hear this as an early release on Patreon, so kudos to you. The plan is to eventually make these available on the regular RSS feed, because I think these conversations are too cool and too important to just indefinitely keep behind the paywall. So without further hesitation, my first guest is a former football player who started out as a Bigfoot in Wisconsin, then became a University of Wisconsin Badger, before he became a center for the Dallas Cowboys. Aside from an illustrious career of sportsmanship, he also double majored in computer engineering and computer science while at U of W, and now is the co-founder and CTO of Demiplane, a company that creates digital toolsets for playing tabletop role-playing games which can be used as an aid to playing in person or remotely online. You will recognize this guest as the creator of Finwick, the Death Tyrant Beholder Chef, featured in episode number 66. Very happy to once again share a pint and parlay with the great and awesome Travis Frederick.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Yes, my second guest, likewise a football prodigy that started as an Eagle in California, was a University of Nebraska Cornhusker, Bobcat, and then chose to become a University of Las Vegas Rebel instead of going to the Badgers in Wisconsin. After college, he had opportunities to be with the Minnesota Vikings and the Los Angeles Wildcats before he found a home as a fullback with the Cleveland Browns. He remains active with training and plans his next moves in the world of the pigskin. You will recognize this guest as the creator of Clover, the Dwarven Crystal Merchant, featured in episode number 92. I'm happy to crack a cold one in Conclave with the one and only Johnny Stanton IV.
Hey, thanks for having me. I will say, you made it sound like I chose UNLV over Wisconsin. And I don't know many people that would make that choice, because it wasn't a choice that I made. But I all love to my alma mater, UNLV, but that was a little bit earlier on that I chose Nebraska.
All right.
All love to Madison. I love Madison.
Yeah, Madison's great.
And my final guest for this evening is the biggest Florida Gators fan that I know personally. He grew up playing fantasy football and baseball regularly and enjoyed being a sports nerd as he grew up. As well, he competed in cross-country running at his college. He shared with me on his episode his passion for being a lover of not just watching sports entertainment, but doing so with the friends and family that you love. These days, he's an ambassador for Take This, the nonprofit, which seeks to decrease the stigma around mental health and to increase support for mental health in gaming. He is a game designer, a Twitch streamer, and his boss is Travis Frederick because he is the community and support manager for Demiplane. You'll recognize this guest as the creator of Sahara, the Dragonborn Werewolf Blacksmith, featured in episode number 77. I'm happy to raise a toast and round robin with the bold and brave Joshua Simons.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad that you started off by saying, experts, with experience, and then enthusiasts, because I'm the sports enthusiast in the group, and they're the professional athletes of the group.
Yeah, but you got the comment saying that you're a passion for being a lover, so I don't think we got that.
Well, lover, drinker, same thing.
It was a lover of watching sports entertainment, but I just saw
that's right.
Still a lover.
Passion for being a lover.
Well, I hope you appreciated the introductions that I wrote for all of you.
They were
I took
incredible.
all
Thank
of
you, Kurt.
5 minutes to craft each one.
Yes. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
So yeah, welcome to the Parlay at the Platter. How is it with all of you here virtually together in the Levitating Platter? Whether some of you work together or some of you are just in similar fields, but maybe haven't had the opportunity to talk with each other before. Because if I recall, I think on Johnny's episode, he was saying, "Oh, I haven't had a chance to talk with Travis yet, but now I have the both of you in the same virtual room as it is."
Yeah, I think I met Travis for the first time when we did that one. It was some Twitch stream that we got to talk about football and D&D. I was actually able to get Miles Garrett involved in that one as like a kind of a last-minute addition, which was fun, considering that I was with 2 All-Pros and then just that I'm here too. But yeah, Travis and I have been able to have some contact last couple months too. So it's awesome to be internet friends. we haven't been able to meet in person yet.
Yeah, I agree. It's really fun to meet people that share different passions. We all can relate on several things, since that's why we're here. But having TTRPGs as a leveling ground, and then finding other things. Kurt, it was really interesting getting together with you over our share for beer at a brewery in Dallas when I was down there. So when you can find multiple interests and find ways to connect on multiple levels, like that's definitely a lot of fun.
Since this is kind of like a panel style episode where the theme going into this is kind of like sports, athletics, and D&D, and so I prepared a list of questions and certainly invited y'all if you have a spur of the moment question that maybe you want to ask another panelist or something like that. But I didn't know how you kind of wanted to have this begin. What's the vibe of the virtual room, if you will?
I'm sure we'll get off on our own tangents with whatever question you want to ask. So fire away with questions. I'm excited to hear them.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll go with the easy one. The first one. What is your personal favorite sport to spectate?
Oh, that's a tough one because I don't know how you felt about this, Travis, but while I was playing, with the amount of football that I was around and the film that I watched, I didn't find myself watching games in my own free time. So I don't know if like now that I've been off a team since August of 2022. I've definitely it's hard to watch when you're not on a team. It's hard to like look at all the guys that like, oh man, I wish I was in that position. I'm still trying to get back there. My favorite sport growing up was always baseball, and I just love people get annoyed with the speed of the game. It's actually something that I love. I will say the new rule that has the pitch clock is awesome, and it makes games go by really fast, which is great. Again, that's relative because it's baseball, but I'd say baseball is probably my favorite sport to spectate.
Awesome.
Huge Dodger fan over here.
I think for me, I agree a little bit. It was really odd. I had no time. We would occasionally watch a primetime game on a Thursday or Sunday night, or maybe a Monday night or something like that. But that was more about the people that you were with than it was the game. Football in America has been kind of a meeting grounds of sort. It's a reason to get together, and so that was usually the reason for those. That's why I was watching those. I do find myself watching more now that I'm done. Mostly watching old teammates, hoping that they don't get hurt, and wishing them success along the way. But honestly, my favorite sport to watch, I think, is hockey. I fell in love with hockey when I was in college. I got to go to my first game at Wisconsin, and the Wisconsin team was great. And then when I got to go to Dallas, I ended up meeting someone down there that was able to get me into games fairly often. So I got to go to the Stars games pretty often, and that was a lot of fun. So hockey's a great one for me.
Yeah. So as someone who I played football in high school, but I was too skinny to continue after like freshman year. I've always enjoyed watching football, but I think in particular for me, one of the things that I love most about watching sports in general is the electric atmosphere in college games. I feel like the crowd is really like enthusiastic and invested in a way that at professional sporting events, right? Like you have adults who are like, oh, like I'm too sophisticated to, rip my shirt off and scream at the top of my lungs for 4 hours. But college kids, they don't know any better, and so they really there's an enthusiasm, not necessarily for the game so much as it's just for the experience, I feel like. But I love the energy for college sports. So I would say college football, probably first and foremost for me. Although I do kind of want to bounce off of something you said there, Johnny, talking about like while you were playing, you have like no time and no desire to watch sports, because I feel like, and maybe this is the same for you, Travis, like where I'm at right now, where professionally, like my day job, I think about tabletop gaming. Like I wake up and I think tabletop gaming until I go to bed. I don't have the time or desire to like sit down and play a game for fun 90% of the time, because that's work. And I think one of the like things that I'm learning in my life right now is how to have a healthy divide between work and play. And since tabletop gaming is my work, I have to find other things to play right now, which has actually caused me to get more into watching sports and more recently, because I'm like, oh, I want to do something that isn't just sitting on my computer, on demi-plane, rolling up characters, whatever. And so I'm going and I'm, watching games at Buffalo Wild Wings or something like that, and digging back into sports, but I didn't have time to do for a few years, kind of early career.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. For me, it was almost the opposite what happened to me.
Mhm.
I used tabletop role-playing games when I was playing football as an escape from my day job.
Absolutely.
So, now we get to work in tabletop role-playing. You won't find me escaping back to football, but I do find escape outside from there the best that I can. But it was great for me to utilize the tabletop role-playing space as a way to get away from the everyday grind of football. There's a lot of opportunity there, and it's a really interesting field to be in. And I loved the time that I was in there, but you always have to find something else to get your mind off it. Otherwise, you'll go crazy just studying over and over and over all the time.
Yeah, the healthy balance of between like work and like personal life, whether that, and it is funny because we, like the two jobs, especially like you, Travis, have had, is between two things that people normally think of as being play. And
right.
when you're living it, it's not. It does end up feeling like work. It's the, I think being an NFL player is the best job in the world.
Awesome job.
But, I wouldn't trade it for the world, but it's still work. But, like you said, Travis, like the escape still needs to be something that is away from that. So that's the whole reason why I found D&D in the first place. It's how I found TTRPGs. Is when I was in college, I think it was my junior year, I was injured. And I just wanted to like get away from football for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to be able to experience something that I had thought about before, but never really had the time or opportunity to be able to dive in. And finally got to experience D&D, and it's, history ever since then. But it's definitely been the way for me to be able to escape from the job that is sports that I've had.
And unfortunately, I don't really have a horse in this show, because I was more of the choir nerd and the academic fine arts type. So I didn't really do any sports. I mean, unless you consider my time in junior high when I was involved in my junior high was involved in the Chuck Norris Kick Drugs Out of America Tang Soo Do program. So I did that for a little bit, and then, kind of tried to keep up with martial arts here and there, but never got. It would be like what was it in The Office when Dwight Schrute was like, oh yeah, I'm a white belt in this form of martial arts, but you've been doing it for 14 years and you've spent how much money? Yeah, no. So
well, as an unofficial ambassador to sports, we consider you one of us.
Oh, thank
Agreed.
you. Well, it's like I've been adopted by my wife's family, who are extreme sports lovers. So with my living here in Dallas, it means I have to, root for the Sooners and such, which is like my wife and my mother-in-law's favorite team, and what they say goes. But I do have a fondness for the Aggies, and like Josh, a fondness for Division II, like my college team, the Angelo State Rams, who I still personally maintain got their logo copied by the Los Angeles Rams. Because the logos are very suspect if you look at the two of them, and I think Angelo State's had their logo a little bit longer. So, but that's just my thing.
Interesting.
All right. Well, let's see. Moving on and making sure we put in some interesting questions that also involve D&D as well. I thought of this. How often do you find yourself using the athletics skill when you're playing a TTRPG? Should it be used more often, or should there be like some other mechanic similar to it?
That's a tough one. I feel like it's something that gets crossed up with acrobatics a whole lot, and especially because strength is very specific to certain kinds of classes.
Mhm.
Unless you're a fighter, a barbarian, or a paladin, there's not a whole lot of use for strength in a lot of the classes. And dexterity holds so much more like importance, AC, saves, and people tend to use acrobatics as like a higher skill. So like if it's climbing something, a lot of times, can I use acrobatics? So well, I don't really think of like an acrobat climbing something. It's like that's an athletic skill, but I don't know. It is funny how it's like all encompassing at the same time, because if you put me and Simone Biles next to each other, it's like she'll be able to do a whole lot, like some very different things, a lot better than I could, but it's still kind of the same goal. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting little thing. I think athletics could probably be used more often, but I think it has its place. Grapple checks, shoving.
I find myself avoiding athletics, and I don't know exactly why. Probably because of the reason that Johnny laid out there, that it's not necessarily quite as overall useful. But I find myself trying to finagle my way through things, utilize the way of the word to get out of situations, or to directly derail the campaign. I've been known to take a left turn when it's a clear, straightforward pathway. I enjoy trying to talk my way out of situations, and I think D&D and tabletop role-playing games are a great place for that to happen, because you can go through, you can try and get yourself an advantage. You can actually try and talk the GM into giving you either advantage or some sort of bonus just by what you have to say. So you can actually influence it more than just the dice. Whereas athletics, unless you get really creative in the way that you're doing it, it gets really hard to modify that. So that's why I enjoy using a charisma-based check a little bit more than the athletics check.
Yeah, I feel like if I put my game design hat on here for a minute, and I look at sports, right? I don't think dodging a tackler or blocking or evading a block is a strength only skill check, or in some cases a dexterity only skill check, and that's where I think I really like the idea of tabletop games. For instance, that comes to mind is the World of Darkness systems, where you can sometimes use two attributes to make a skill check, because I think that is maybe a little more reflective of real life. And I realize that I'm not answering the question, and I'm deliberately dodging it to talk about game design theory here for a minute. But I think there's something to be said about the ways in which we kind of simplify situations in order to gamify them. And I think the strength dexterity split is something that's like a great example of that, because I would wager that both Travis and Johnny here are probably much more agile than I am, because they've had to be at a professional level, even though I'm certainly not a very strong individual, which means they just have me on all counts, right? And so I think it's not a dichotomy, is I think really what I'm getting at. But yeah, that's my tangent.
But it is funny though, because D&D does it's not really well used, but there is that system of being able to transfer proficiency and a skill to another stat.
Yeah.
So people often will use okay, I'll do an intimidation check, but use the strength score rather than charisma score. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, is there a way to use athletics in a stat that isn't strength? Obviously, I think you can use it in dexterity, which I think is probably a really good way of doing that kind of combo. It's not acrobatics, but you're also using more dexterity than strength. Yeah. So roll an athletics check using your dexterity. And I wonder if there's probably not any kind of way to be able to do that with intelligence or constitution or something. That probably is we can probably creatively figure out something.
But, I flex my brain harder to think better.
I think though, I could make an argument for intelligence there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Johnny, as well as anybody, that leverage is key.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to block, if you're going to be moving something.
Low man wins.
And leverage is not necessarily only a strength or athletic type movement. A lot of it has to do with how you position your body and how you take advantage of the snap count and how you anticipate what a defender's going to do. So I think you could make an argument that intelligence could be kicked in there as well.
I think in particular, you could also, like, if I was to try to gamify football into, 5th edition rules, I would argue that, like, calling an audible at the line would be something like an athletics intelligence check, because you're trying to, like, use your understanding of the playing field and the physicality of the guys in front of you to create an opening in a way that requires a snap judgment as opposed to, or maybe even wisdom. I don't know. Don't get me into the intelligence wisdom dichotomy. Anyways.
Well, book smarts, like memorizing the plays versus like how it's perceived on the field in the moment. That might be the difference between intelligence versus wisdom, I suppose.
That's definitely like a specific skill. Like, I've known plenty of guys who would probably rank low on the intelligence stat, but know this like the playbook like the back of their hand. It's like, it's specifically something that you learn how to learn as a football player. And I'm not going to name any names.
Yeah, we're getting some interesting discussions here. Yeah, I'm liking this. Let's see, moving along. How did your love of sports translate into a love of tabletop gaming?
Well, apparently I'm a lover, according to Johnny, so...
True.
That's according to Kurt.
Okay, fair point.
I'm not going to answer this one first again. I've already.
Yeah, Josh, go ahead.
I think one of the defining characteristics of who I am as a person is that I pick something and I hyper focus on it. I think that's called ADHD. But in particular for me, for things that tend to be hobbies, like both sports and, at least initially, tabletop role-playing games, it's something that, since it started as an escape from school or work or whatever, it's that thing that you think about while you're at the day job or in school and don't particularly want to be, paying attention in math class or in that big meeting that could have been an email. And so it just kind of starts as that thing that, like, rolls around in your brain and you can't get rid of it. So I don't know that, like, it's necessarily a one-to-one comparison, just like a general, like, enthusiasm for things that spark joy.
Yeah, I like that. And I think for me, the ability to have a new and different challenge is where that came in. I fell in love with sports because, well, I was good at them naturally, but two, like, everything was different. Every play is different. You can run the same play 100 times against the same opponent, and you're going to end up in a different place. And that's one of the special things about TTRPGs is you can run the same campaign 100 different times, and I promise you're not going to end up in the same place or have the same exact story. The sandbox nature of it and the collaborative storytelling aspect that it contains makes it different and challenging every time that you do it, and in turn makes it interesting every time you do it. And I think that's where it has translated a little bit for me.
Yeah, for me, it is funny just how much they do relate, because an old adage is like, sports is the greatest drama. Like, there is no better storytelling than a really great sports game. And I think the best way that you can kind of relate the two is, okay, if I describe a group of people coming together to defeat overwhelming odds, did that describe a D&D party, or does that describe your favorite team's, like, comeback victory, like, to win the game? Like, it's very much just storytelling altogether. You're trying to get past conflict, and that's what the best kind of storytelling does. That's what gets you excited. That's what gets you coming back. And that's, like, the biggest fans that I know are sports fans and TTRPG fans, and there's not that much difference between the two.
And then let's see, how have your athletic abilities and skills impacted your role playing in a TTRPG?
I think for me, it's led me to be a little bit more creative. I would not call myself a creative, an artist by any means. I don't have a lot of the skills to, put art on paper or write a song or anything like that. But my creativity comes in the realm of problem solving, and that was something that is probably one of my best athletic abilities, was solving problems, and in turn reading defenses and things like that. But problem solving is a very quick and easy transition into tabletop games. It's all about problem solving. It's about how you can get your group from one point to another, or overcome a challenge or something like that. So I think it has made me a better player of these games, because it has led me to problem solve first, instead of trying to attack or trying to immediately engage in the situation.
I like that. I think so when I'm role playing a character, I try to find touchstones, things that I can relate to, that I think other people can relate to. I try to find the humanizing elements of that character. And so while I was never a professional athlete, I did play a variety of sports, throughout my childhood. And so we'll sometimes draw from those experiences to connect to a fighter, or to a barbarian, or a character who likes to get, down and dirty in the front line, so to speak. I would approach this question just simply from the more experiences you have, and the wider variety of experiences that you have, the more you're able to connect with different types of characters. And so I tend to pull on experiences playing sports when I play characters who might, play a sport of some variety, or pull on a competitive, character, someone who has a competitive nature. I think that's really the touch point for me is, okay, how do I get in the head of this character? And then how do I take those lived experiences that I've had and translate them into this fictional world, into this character who isn't quite me, but is, a shadow of me, or shares some of my attributes. And so having something to connect to there makes it really easy to step into the shoes of that character.
Yeah, for me, I think I think you might have mentioned this at the very beginning. I spent a lot more time playing quarterback than any other position in my football career. I played it all the way through college, all the way through high school, and just changed when I got to the NFL. And I think one of the defining characteristics of a quarterback is kind of the leader of the offense. And I think that comes out a lot when I do role play. Not intentionally so, because nobody likes somebody who hogs a spotlight, or always tries to go in front of the party to be the face in every single character. But I think it also has helped me in other ways, because what is being a quarterback but just basically being a really good point guard, just giving assists, right? You're just trying to hand off success to other guys. And I think that's something that I've really been able to take to while role playing, is being able to turn the spotlight to somebody else, and show that give them the big moment, recognizing someone's strength or something that they're trying to set up for a character arc or growth or something, and be able to turn to that to be spotlit and help them have a moment at the table, which is always my favorite part of playing.
Well, and I think there is something to be said about the archetypes in characters. I think of a Captain America type character who, because they have the respect of everyone on the team, people look to them as a natural leader because they know them and trust their judgment. And I think the quarterback, in a lot of ways, should at least strive to have that kind of relationship with the folks on the team, where people say, right, yeah, you're going to make this play call, and we're going to go along with it because we know you and we trust you, and we respect that you're going to make the decision that makes the most sense in this scenario.
I'd like to think so.
Does that translate across all the other sports, whether it's the captain of a basketball team? I don't know if there's a similar position on baseball, or even in a hockey team, which I know after listening to an episode of No Dumb Questions to explain the concept of the game and basically how it's like rugby on skates, and how there is this whole gnarly physicality to it, but yet also there's this implied tactical nature to the game as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's probably just having a leadership capability in general. If you're naturally somebody who tends to get in front of people and try to lead them, I think that you would probably fall into that role in general, and you'd probably be able to fit into certain roles on a field or on a court more naturally than others.
I think like from like a sociology perspective, anytime you get a group of people together, whether it's in some kind of organized structure like a team, or if it's just, a group of people hanging out, there will kind of always be a natural tendency to identify someone who is the leader of the group. So even if there's a team sport that doesn't have an identified captain or leadership type position, I think anytime you put people in the same space to do something together, someone will step to the plate and be that kind of captain figure. And so, I think about all tabletop groups that I've been in, right? GM aside, even in like GM-less games, there's oftentimes a person who takes the initiative to say, okay, well, we need to make a decision. Let's do this thing. Or, hey, we want to do X, Y, and Z, and, let's call some shots just so that way, we're all on the same page. And I think that just happens naturally anytime you put people in the same place.
I think Johnny alluded to this earlier, but is there more storytelling in sports than what appears on the surface? Whether that is, the narrative of the team making their comeback, or is it like, the drama that would make like a popular streaming service, like Ted Lasso or something like that, where it's like, the lives of these characters or these the sports management staff or whatever.
I don't know what you're talking about. There's never been a good sports movie ever. I don't know. I've never heard of the movie Rudy or Hoosiers or anything like that. No, I mean, obviously there's plenty of just great storytelling naturally in sports without the over dramatization of Hollywood. Just watch any team's championship documentary that comes out after every championship. They come out they edit together just like the points of conflict, of rising from the ashes, about the one player who came back in the middle of the year who was able to lead the team to clinch a clutch victory. So yeah, there's obviously a huge amount of storytelling in sports, and that's why people watch. They wouldn't if it was just watching numbers go up on a scoreboard, then it wouldn't be interesting. It's about the people, it's about the characters, it's about getting past conflict.
Yeah, I agree. I think sports, even individual sports, bring just a level of drama that's unmatched anywhere else. Team sports, when you bring a group of people together and put them, task them with overcoming a challenge, and every sport is that way. The goal is to win the championship, regardless of if you're the worst team in the league or the best team in the league. It's still hard, and that's going to be a challenge. And there are countless storylines throughout a season. You have intra-team dynamics, you have inter-team dynamics, you have the pressures of the outside, you have the way that the media is going to portray certain things versus the realities of it. And it makes for good TV. It makes for great entertainment. That's why it's one of the greatest bits of entertainment in America right now. Is people want to watch that, they want to relate to that, and they want to be a part of it. That's why you have fandoms that are so deep. It's because they want to be a part of that story, and they get to be. And when their team wins the championship, you bet that they're going to show up for the parade, because that's their bit, that's their part in the celebration of the victory that the group did. So I think it's really closely related.
And even outside of the normal season, it doesn't even have to be going towards a championship, but the amount of people that get stoked for Hard Knocks every year, which is just 3 preseason games and 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks of preseason practices, but you just latch on to the characters that the editors are able to uplift and tell these amazing stories out of just film that they're able to get from naturally occurring interactions that happen within the building.
Yep.
Yeah. So out of college, I started working in healthcare, and I had this lofty ambition to get a work game going where I took, coworkers from the office to come and play D&D with me. And in order to convince one of the guys in the office who was kind of interested, he'd heard of D&D before but didn't really know what it was. In order to convince him to come and join this office game, I was basically like, look, you get to make your own WWE character and you get this storyline. Do you want to be a hero? Do you want to be a villain? Like, you get to have signature moves and like cool looks, and you get this storyline throughout the course of the campaign where you can have character growth and accomplish these things and get revenge on the guy who, beat you early on and do all this stuff. And he was like, oh, well, when you put it like that, that sounds super cool. I'm so into it. And I convinced a dude to play D&D because he could make a WWE character. And lo and behold, he made a rogue and didn't actually do any of the WWE stuff, but he got the idea from understanding, the powerful narratives in sports and seeing how that could tie into a tabletop game, and that's what got him excited about it.
And that's all WWE and professional wrestling is just like enhanced storytelling within sports.
Yeah, it's extremely physical acting.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Joshua, but wasn't Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, I know he played football in Florida before he made his way to the WWE, right?
That sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, he played in Miami.
Yeah. It was Hurricanes.
Yeah.
Oh, the Hurricanes. Sorry.
It was Miami.
Yeah.
And then Brock Lesnar played where? I forget where Brock Lesnar. He played for the Vikings for like a preseason or something. And then there's another guy, I think Titus something. He's a former Florida Gator.
Oh.
Yeah. Brock Lesnar.
I'm sure there are tons of former football players that are in the WWE.
Google says that Brock Lesnar went to the University of Minnesota.
Okay. Yeah.
That makes sense.
He ended up as a Viking.
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, at my high school, I know that a lot of the guys on the football team were wrestling in the off season, and then they were encouraged to do that because one, you still get to compete in some way, and two, you're learning skills that are kind of compatible to the types of things you're doing in football. And I had friends in high school who, like I did football and then I did wrestling, and actually I prefer wrestling more. Or folks who were in wrestling and then someone said, hey, you should consider playing football, and they did, and they made the switch in high school. Because the two have similar skill sets, but one of them, just scratches that itch a little bit differently for them.
Now, if you had somebody that does both and then got them into drama class, that's how you build a WWE wrestler.
It's true.
Wow. The perfect build.
Before the advent of a game like Blood Bowl, did you ever try to simulate sports in a fantasy tabletop game?
I never did. I'll admit, I'll be the first to admit that. But I did play. So my business partner Peter he's our forever GM, and Peter created a game that was an offshoot of soccer and hockey that was played on hoverboards, and created all of the mechanics of it. We were playing Star Wars, what is now called Saga Edition, back in the day, but it was Wizards of the Coast D20. It was really a 3.5 offshoot, but he created all of these rules and how you could go and play this game, and so it was really interesting to see sports depicted in that way. We also did a sort of a pod racing thing, all of those. You would argue that that's definitely sports too. It's interesting when you try to play that in these systems, because it's such a micro event in comparison to how you play big politics and larger scale games within tabletop games. But it was fun. It was interesting, and it definitely was a change up.
Yeah, that same guy from my old office game was a big baseball fan, and so one of the things that once we started kind of getting into talking about tabletop gaming, he was like, hey, I feel like you could make a baseball tabletop role-playing game, because how like the numbers all kind of just like flow together. Particularly, he wanted to like simulate seasons to come up with a game where you could like manage like a team. And so we started theory crafting. We never actually like did it, but it was going to be D100 based and play a little bit like the way the Cortex system plays, but for teams and games as opposed to individual characters. But yeah, we were basically going to just like steal like the MLB The Show like stat ratings for players, and then just kind of shuffle in whatever we could. theory crafting. Never actually did anything with it, but I have like a half page of notes somewhere for how to play baseball as a tabletop game.
Yeah, I know that Dimension 20 in their Fantasy High season, they did something that was like very similar to football, but I don't even think that they actually made it like part of the game. They just had like, I think Lou Wilson's character rolled a natural 20 and then just like he got kicked off the team or something, which was like I think a great it was a great moment early on in that first season. As far as me playing something, I've never put it into a game. I think within the fantasy like world, it's hard to be like such a side session that I think would really only end up working if you have like a really really regular like weekly game where you get to take a break. It's kind of like a tournament kind of arc where you get to go through and like start, try to beat to get the champion. I will, however, I'm planning on just with a million other things going on. I think I told Travis about it already a little bit earlier this year. I still plan on wanting to do a football TTRPG in like the realm of Friday Night Lights. I think it would be awesome to be able to kind of build up like the drama of the interpersonal relationships and having to balance school life and football life and then personal life, and just really kind of building out the archetypes of characters. And I think that'd be really fun. It's on my to-do list at some point. And I have some cool people involved with it, but TM.
Yeah, that's a neat concept. I'll be excited to see it when it comes out. It just occurred to me, I did once play bocce ball in a D&D session. This was a weekly game, and basically it was roll a d20 and then roll another d20, and whoever gets closest to the first d20 result gets it. But yeah,
love that.
Yeah, we had like a local bocce tournament at the neighborhood tavern, and our team lost, for the record.
All right, and keeping on with the questions, who, in your opinion, is one of the greatest athletes in history, alive or dead, and why?
It's always the hardest question to answer. Like, old heads will say Jim Thorpe, who is like absolutely dominant in his era. But if you put Jim Thorpe on today's football field, it's a different like story. I actually saw a very funny tweet that said, and stay with me here. It says, "I don't care what anyone says, Jerry Rice could not make it in today's NFL. With the talent, the skill level, the athleticism, Jerry Rice would just not be able to." I mean, he's 60 years old. and just like the last line is like, oh yeah, okay. Let's back to the question. I think it's hard. It's obviously hard to say. I mean, I think Bo Jackson is the platonic answer. One of the greatest athletes of all time, multiple, sports, was able to be at a caliber that not many people are able to make. But I think if you don't respect what Shohei Ohtani is doing right now, then you're living under a rock, because he is, it's only half the season, but he is doing something that does not compare to any sport. Like nobody has ever played at like an all-star level, both as a quarterback and as a safety. Like the closest thing is like maybe Deion Sanders, but he wasn't playing necessarily at the highest level possible, and he wasn't just playing corner and like returner. So yeah, it's Shohei Ohtani. I think, say what you will about baseball players being athletes, I still think it's incredibly hard with what they're doing. And I think he is more dominant right now than most people have, than most greatest players have ever been.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with you about Shohei Ohtani. He's the reason that I actually care about what's happening in baseball right now, for the record. I normally just don't follow it, but I saw something at the start of the year, and I was like, oh, let me go just like take a quick look and see what's up. And you make a great point. When it comes to like greatest of all time arguments, I go back to your Michael Jordan versus your LeBron James. I think Kobe Bryant deserves a mention in there. Aside from talking about specifically basketball players, I have a hard time staking any claims, but I will say that I have a lot of respect for Emmitt Smith as a football player. I feel like he, in a lot of ways, I have to be careful with my words here because Travis was on the same team. I think he did something that was really impressive for a running back to, in a lot of ways, carry the scoring for the Cowboys offense for a couple of years there. Not to say that there weren't other contributors on the teams. He was perhaps the playmaker for a few years there. Is that a fair assessment, Travis? Feel free to correct me.
I think that's fair. I think, when you start to talk about a great running back, you should also talk about the offensive line. That
obviously, I rescind my previous statement. Travis Frederick, best football player of all time.
No, not me. The offensive line that was there with Emmett. But yes, no, I agree. Really, really dynamic, and there's a reason that he holds records still today, and really impressive. I think for me, one of the maybe it's a product of when I grew up and the spectacle around it, but watching Michael Phelps do what he did over the course of several years really was impressive. When you talk about the amount of success that he was able to achieve over that time, historically was even outrageously good. So I think definitely worth mentioning in the conversation.
Like I said, I'm the total neophyte in this audience. So, I'm just trying to think of like other big ones that I'm sure people would love for me to shout out. I mean, we're here in Dallas and Texas. And so I'm sure Nolan Ryan's got to get a shout out, not only just for the fact that he punched a dude on the mound and, everyone loves him for that. I guess my first sports team that I remember ever gravitating towards was the Houston Astros. And I know, say what you will about any, scandals and, whether they deserve championships or not, but I still love my Houston Astros. And I remember one of the first players I ever liked was like Jeff Bagwell, because, he was like the first baseman and he was cool. And I still love the Astros. I mean, the uniforms, the colors, it's all great. And it's like my piece of nostalgia for home. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of great athletes out there, of course, across history and across all sports and divisions and areas of play. And for some reason, my mind just wants to say, I also think Andre the Giant would have been a cool dude to get to know in person, figuratively and literally larger than life, and just seemed like a good dude.
Yeah, can't disagree with you there.
All right, and then let's see. To follow up the previous question, what kind of D&D or TTRPG character would the person that you chose be in a game, and why? So if you had to gamify the person that you just named, what kind of D&D TTRPG character do you think they would best exemplify, and why?
I mean, I think the most versatility you get on the field is like that you get from a character is probably like a battle master fighter or something. I think Bo Jackson probably fits well as that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to think about Shohei, probably, I mean, what can you do can you make a level 20 character in 2 different classes? That's basically what he's doing. For anybody who doesn't know about Shohei Ohtani and only knows D&D, imagine making 2 high level characters, but combining them into one. That's basically what he's doing.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think for Emmitt Smith, I would just have to go with Rogue, because talk about slipperiness, and you just get a lot of movement speed as a Rogue, but maybe like an Arcane Trickster Rogue. I feel like he had some moves.
Arcane Trickster Rogue with 18 strength score.
Yeah. He had a huge strength, but going back to my previous point about strength and dexterity, you kind of separate them.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like they go so well together in skill positions.
I think just to be different, I will classify Michael Phelps as a barbarian, and some sort of archetype off of that. But I feel like there's some level of focus that goes into that. You could see before a race the focus that he put himself into.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a rage, not necessarily a fit of uncontrollable rage that you may automatically think of when you think of rage, but really some sort of hyper-focused rage where that's all that mattered at that time, and his ability to channel that and compete at the level that he did for those periods of time. I think you could relate that.
Oh, and then perfectly he would go with the Mercer barbarian subclass of the duck totem.
Oh, that's right.
Water off the back and stuff like that. I had 4 last questions that I had thought up, and trying to get into some meaty stuff to really get into this intersection between sports, athletics, and D&D. So, do you think there still is a culture, quote unquote, war or stigma between the arts and sports? Why or why not?
I don't know if it's a war. I don't know if it I'm sure at times it was something that was a little bit more vitriolic between the two, like jock versus nerd type thing. But it's definitely there's been work to break it down. That's definitely something that I have been trying to do in my own little way. I think in the very near future, within a week or so, I'm planning on starting a little bit of a TikTok playlist type thing. I am teaching and alternating episodes and relating it within the terms that they understand. Sports to TTRPG nerds, TTRPG to sports nerds, jocks, those people. So, and I'm calling it Athletics Check, and I'm going week, hopefully every other day or so release a new episode where I'm making those. This is kind of an announcement. I haven't talked about this with anybody. And
Awesome.
Where I'm relating them in their own terms. But teaching, sports fans all the D&D classes. I'm teaching TTRPG nerds who know nothing about sports, all the football positions, and trying to relate them okay, what sports player would be, this class. And so yeah, that's something that I'm trying to, in my own little way, do to break down the jock versus nerd binary.
You just got my follow on TikTok.
Nice.
I like it.
I'm really glad you mentioned the jock versus nerd dichotomy, because my first thought when Kurt asked the question was, I think of that dichotomy as being something tied to school. Because in particular, high school, college levels, you typically have 2 programs that are competing for, funding. And so that's, I think, where, if we trace the origin back, that's probably where a lot of that kind of divide in terms of ideologies comes from. You have 2 kind of competing values that are both going for the same resources. And I just think historically, right, let me flex a degree here really quickly. You go back to Greek culture, particularly philosophy. They talked about these warrior kings, or the philosophical term that they would call would be philosopher kings, right? People who ruled both with military strength as the kings, but also had great intellectual strength as the philosophers. And so historically, I don't think the 2 have really been in opposition to one another until we introduce the capitalist system that makes us compete with one another for money. And so all that to say, I don't think there's anything that really truly sets us at odds there, except for competing for resources. So I think a lot of things that we learn in school are hard to unlearn. A lot of things that we learn growing up are hard to unlearn. And so some of those ideas may have stuck around, but I think that the 2 really go hand in hand together to create well-rounded people and a well-rounded society. And so I am all in on any efforts and activities to try to countermand that kind of messaging that people may still have.
I think the great uniter is High School Musical. I think when we were kids, it's funny how this turns around. My kids are now in High School Musical, but that was the first time there was an active movement to unite those things and cross those paths. I agree a lot with Josh and what you say there about competing for resources. The thing that I would add to that is I think the greatest resource in all of our lives is time, and time is what I think you're competing for more than anything. To be great at anything, you have to invest your time and energy into it. And so you find people that want to be good at sports, or their coach wants them to be good. And so they say, hey, when you have free time outside of school, you need to be lifting, or you need to be practicing, you need to be doing these other things. And it's the same thing with the arts. You need to be practicing, you need to be singing, or you need to, go do what that is, because you're only going to get better with practice. There are very few people in life that can just naturally do anything without the practice. And so when you're competing for time and trying to decide what you want to do, it makes it really difficult for people to be well-rounded. And I think that's why you don't find as many people that that are great at both, because it just takes a lot of time and effort to do it. And when you choose to do those things, you sacrifice something else. There's always that. I agree, and I think that there's been a lot of moves made in the right direction. And things like what Johnny are doing is really helpful in helping to break down some of those barriers. But I think talking about it in general is the best way to break down the barriers, and I feel like that's something that is true in a lot of different cases. But things like even this, the show that we're doing tonight, having a conversation about it, like those things are bring up good conversations between other people. When you have two guys on a football team that you would have never expected both enjoy anime or both enjoy doing, all of a sudden they're uniting over it where they weren't talking about it before. And I think, in what I get to do now, I get to see a lot of statistics. I get to see a lot of market research, and the numbers are pretty wild, and nobody talks about it. You don't hear about it in the public about people that are playing tabletop role-playing games or people that are doing certain things, and it's because for some reason they feel like they shouldn't be talking about it or can't talk about it. But once they have somebody that they relate to that does it or makes it more acceptable or reduces the stigma, then you start to talk about it, and you can really realize the power of any of that, whether that's being creative, whether that's enjoying sports as a creative, whether that's crossing those boundaries in different ways as well.
Should we introduce more art into the sports world, or should more sports be introduced into the arts world at the junior high, high school level, at college? Should we be doing that continuously through the education process?
I mean, the more you intertwine the two, I think the better off you are. It's tough to say. Like, I think high schools it's very disparate across the country, like with how much funding they get in general. And, only with funding can you actually have them like actually be doing things. So yeah, I remember when I was in high school, we had this new sports facility, it was a 3-story building that had classrooms in it, but also had like a football office, football weight room, like a locker room, like all these different things. And for the opening of it, the football team went out there with like the choir and then ended up like singing a song or something. It's so interesting how it's a little thing, but the more you can get those two groups to interact with each other, the better you are. I don't know how necessarily you'd be able to get like sports into the arts in the high school levels, and in college. I think it's interesting because I think the really only way that it like overlaps is through like probably band, or at least that's like the most visible way of interacting in between plays at halftime, and during timeouts you have the band performing. But outside of that, there's not really a whole lot that interacts between the two within college, because I think high school is so much smaller of a community. A college community is so big that it's hard to be able to get a whole lot of communication between the two. So I don't know what way to really have those two interact in college.
You said that, and that reminded me of like, oh yeah, actually, in my college days at Angelo State, I was in the basketball pep band. So even though I'm a mediocre bass guitar player, I signed up and was able to play bass guitar. And so we had our little section of the bleachers in the Stevens Arena. And so I'd be there right next to all the percussion section down at the front. And then we've got all the woodwinds and the brass as they start trailing up and up and up in our section. And so, yeah, like during the men's and the women's basketball games, we'd be playing little stingers or like little set pieces and stuff like that. And yeah, during that time, yeah, I did care more about basketball games and stuff like that. And we got really into like razzing the other team. We jingle the keys and be like, start the bus. And, sometimes we had to be like, okay, let's rein it back. We're getting a little too rowdy and stuff like that. But yeah, no, that's a great example that reminded me of like, oh yeah, being able to be in the pep band got me to care more about basketball, at least for a time.
And I think, the question is, should we integrate the two more? And I feel like the answer is yes. And the new question becomes, how do we do that? And I don't have a great answer for that question. But, I do think, as has already been pointed out, right, you think about band, you think about cheer and dance as forms of arts. I even think about, like There's people who are, doing sound mixing and putting together the playlists that play during athletics games. The videographers, the folks who are putting together tape. I have studied film for some time in school, and so I think of that as an art form, and think of it more broadly as being part of the arts. And so there's certainly a lot of ways in which the two worlds do already cross over. And so I think the question is, how can we do that more? And that's the challenging thing, because we have to actually think outside of our own experiences and say, hey, what can we do to make this better, right? To take the way that things are and improve them in a way that hasn't been done before.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to kindness and understanding, right? It's about having those conversations, and it's difficult to do, especially at the college level. You're busy, everyone's focused on the things that they need to, especially in athletics. Like you have a job, and your job is to do those things, but to take a moment and slow down once a week and just understand what somebody else does in the building that helps you, whether that's the video team or it's the marketing team that's putting together creative to go do that. It's the sound mixer. It's all of those. To take a minute to understand what they do, and that their job is difficult too. It's different. Everyone has a job, and for the production that is a football game or a sports game, there are so many different things that go into it, and it's really easy to look past that and only focus on your job. But when you take a step back and look at the broader picture, there's so much that goes into it. And I think that being able to do that at a younger level would even be better, to understand, take a moment for the football team to go visit, the band, and understand how they work together as a team. What's different about the teamwork in a band versus on the field, and how can you take the best things from one world and translate them into a different world to be more successful in what you're trying to do.
Remembering in elementary school music classes, a lot of you're playing music, you're playing simple instruments, but you're also moving around the classroom, and so you're doing these real kinetic kinesiology type of thingamabobs while you're getting involved. And so what Travis was saying is that would have been cool for me in junior high or high school if that had been something where, hey, the basketball team is going to sit in on a choir practice because they're going to learn how you guys work in harmony with supporting each other when it comes to different parts of the music. Or, maybe the band sits in on a swimming match and they're watching them, how do they move through the water? And so what are the ways that you can incorporate that?
It feels very much like either an episode of Ted Lasso or of Glee, and I can't tell which.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe it's the crossover.
Yeah.
I remember in college in my music undergraduate classes for conducting, we did have to go to the university pool. And so to learn the feel of how your arms should move when you're conducting, so you have the resistance of the water. I remember that was, something that we physically had to do that kind of got us out of our normal music building and brought us to another part of campus. So yeah, I think, we should do that across the board, incorporate the two, this more work and play and work sort of give and take. Okay, getting to my last two questions that I have that I've thought of. Let's see. Now being so involved in the TTRPG hobby with your positions of leadership, how have your views or perceptions changed concerning the sports industry?
That everybody needs a hobby. Everybody needs a hobby, because it's just, I'm like I said, I'm a very big advocate of being able to have that work-life balance, and just being able to, as we all said, escape from your job, and even as a high school or college athlete, it's very much a job at that point, because you're spending so much of your life doing it. You need to have something to be able to get your mind off of it. So, I think all my teammates have had that, whether it's video games, reading, just anything that you can keep to yourself even. I think there are obviously examples of the greats who it's that's their whole life, like Bill Belichick. I don't think Bill Belichick has a hobby. I think I'd be surprised if any head coach in the NFL has a hobby. That's why they got there. But I think for 99% of the population, you need to be able to just escape from it for a little bit.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I better appreciate, especially in recent years, one of the great privileges, but also the great challenges of being in any kind of public eye is the pressure that comes with it. And I think having not competed on quite the same level as these guys have, I have a newfound respect for the folks who can show up and perform under pressure day in and day out, because there's so many eyes on you. And I'm thinking particularly in the realm of, like influencing and content creation here, but comparing this back to sports, I think there is certainly a lot of eyes on you and a lot of expectations that are placed on you that you maybe necessarily don't place on yourself. You're trying to just show up and get the job done, and people are expecting this thing of you or that thing of you or this other thing of you. And just because they expect those things of you, if you don't do them, they might feel, disappointed and feel let down because you didn't do the thing that you didn't actually know you were signed up to do in the first place. I have a newfound respect for, I think, the weight that you carry in the public eye from my time here in the tabletop industry. And I don't think it's a bad thing by any means to have that pressure and to have, that feeling of all eyes on you. I said earlier, I feel like it's a responsibility and a privilege. And I mean that, but it is definitely something that I look at athletes now who are like cool under pressure, and I'm like, man, I've got my measly, 10 to 20,000 followers on the internet. If I had that many eyes, live television on me, live in the stadium on me every single night, I think I would lose my cool.
Yes. Yeah, I understand. I hear what you're saying. I think for me, it's been really interesting to make the transition from sports into tabletop. And really, I think it's more the transition from sports to business, and how much translates over. After having been involved in it and learning the ability for leadership skills to move over, how teamwork works, how goal setting and organization, and all of those things that, when you think about football and professional athletes, you think that they're good at what they do and then they retire and they go away. You don't hear about them anymore. They just fade into the dark. But a lot, most, if not all of them, go and do something else too. And, I never thought about what that transition was going to be like and what skills would translate over. And it's pretty amazing. Other than I don't, push people around. Josh can attest to that. I don't actually push anyone around in the business. Most other skills have translated over. And it's really made me step back and respect other people that have made those transitions, and whether they're going into real estate or they go into whatever it is, it's a really interesting thing to step back and look at former athletes and how that transition's worked.
And then the last question that I have prepared, and then it's a free-for-all after this for all I know, but with the rise of streaming and esports, what can the major sports leagues and franchises learn from the gaming world?
As the college sports fan here, I'll say something that they have already learned in recent years is if you pay your talent, the entire ecosystem does better. And I think that's something that esports figured out pretty early on, paying, even as young as high schoolers to compete at a professional level. And so seeing that now take place in the NCAA for athletes to be able to be paid for the use of their likeness, that's something that I'm excited about as a huge improvement for the sports world. So change is already happening, and it's good in my mind.
I'm still over here trying to think of one.
Yeah, I know. I think it'll be really interesting to see how esports grows and streaming in comparison to sports. I think there still is a pretty large dichotomy between scripted streaming, whether that's recorded shows or planned episodes, and sports. And part of that comes with the ability to write the script and the chaos and unpredictability that is sports. And you may relate reality TV to the chaos and unpredictability of major sports, but that's what makes them different, and different is good in this case. They both are great, and there's a reason for both of them. So introducing, and sharing concepts there may not necessarily be the best. Maybe what they learn here is that it's important that they embrace what they're good at and embrace the way that the fan base enjoys it. It'll be interesting to see how it continues to grow, and if those things come closer together, stay the same, or get farther apart.
It is funny the way that the question is worded, and we have a little list of the questions here. The way that sports leagues and franchises can learn from the gaming world, I think the legislative world would probably read that in a much different way, that phrase, because it's such a thing right now. And I know it's not exactly related to esports, but just the sports leagues and gambling right now is such a topic of conversation. But I mean, it is interesting because esports has borrowed and has learned from the sports world, the physical sports world, so much in how they market their players and how the events are organized and advertised and all these different the way that they're able to make it an event. That sports has been around for so long as such a major industry, and esports is such a new industry, that it's easy for esports to be able to learn from that world. And learning the opposite direction would be tough to do, because it's such a large thing. It's going to move extremely slowly, and like Travis said, maybe it's a good thing that it doesn't learn from it and paves the way forward for other things like esports to be able to become relevant and prevalent. I think one thing that's very interesting is when I was in Cleveland, I became familiar and friendly with some of the basketball NBA 2K affiliate of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think I forget what their team name was, but they were in a league that competed against all the other team affiliates of NBA teams. And I thought it'd be how interesting would it be the opposite way, if there was a FaZe Clan basketball team or 100 Thieves football team. It'd be so interesting, and I don't even know what that would look like. But yeah, I just think it's wild to think about that kind of idea, because I think that one thing that NFL teams probably, or sports leagues and teams probably could learn from the esports teams and leagues is branding. I think that they do such a good job of doing collaborations and really fashion forwards, streetwear-esque branding, that I think with the amount of money there is behind having an NFL or MLB or NBA license behind your brand, there's obviously a ton of weight that carries and a ton of money that's behind that, but it also leads them to be a little bit less liberal with that licensing and with that branding. That I think if you're collaborating with 100 Thieves or designing a jacket or something like that, this is just, I think, specifically fashion stuff, but you're probably a little bit less conservative with what you can do with that logo on your shirt.
I know previous guests of the show, both of them, Father Blake Britton and Bobby Angel together, they did a YouTube miniseries called God and Gaming. And so one of the early things I remember in the series of episodes is Father Blake mentions that I think in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, they're supposed to be building this whole esports arena complex that's right there in the heart of the city. And the idea is that it's supposed to be one of the biggest esports gaming centers that's going to host all these big tournaments and stuff like that, which just seems interesting or different. And so, as far as I can think or relate with TTRPGs, I know I've had the opportunity to only attend one live show for Critical Role, and that was when they did the Darrington Brigade show down in Austin, because it was easy enough for me to commute there. But with them and other streaming shows being able to do these live events, it'd be interesting to see in a future where it's Critical Role plays the big esports arena and then sells it out or something like that, because everyone wants to come and watch a bunch of nerds play D&D around a table in the big arena. They've sort of started making those ways where they have limited streaming events at certain AMC or Cinemark locations. So is that going to be the next step where, these big streaming shows, Demiplane is going to beat them to the punch and be okay, the esports arena, we're going to do a live show there or something like that, and we'll have Johnny Stanton be one of the players.
That's an interesting idea. We've already seen tabletop shows doing live events, like you said. Critical Role is a great example. I know the McElroys have done some touring shows. I think NADPOD. I'm trying to think if
Dimension 20.
I don't actually know if Dimension 20 has done their own thing outside of conventions, and if they are, I could be forgetting it. But I'm thinking of Dungeons and Daddies. I'm trying to think if they've done live stuff.
They just did a live show in Austin.
Yeah.
And they just announced a tour.
Yeah. This is already like something that we're starting to see outside of conventions. With conventions, it makes sense, with things like Acquisitions Inc. and then all of great opportunities since casts are already at a convention, or since folks from the community, from influencers, industry folks, whoever are already at a convention. It's a great spot to do a one-shot. I think it would be really interesting to see the idea of doing a show at events and tying those together, whether it's, maybe it's already starting to be done with like this Beetle and Grimm show for the new TV channel, the Faster Purple Worm.
Yeah.
That could be the start of it, where you're filming something on site, a live venue, that's becoming something to show to an audience later on, but the experience is in person first. It's an interesting idea, and I think the idea of spectacle and this live experience it is something that I would love to see us get into in the tabletop space. I think we've got room to grow in that area, and room to maybe pioneer some cool new things. But I think there are also some practical challenges that we'll have to navigate, taking something that is, primarily a pen and paper game and making it very engaging and appealing in a live event space for something beyond a one-shot. And that's where resources like your virtual tabletops, like even just physical minis and terrain, they do something to make it more engaging. But I think whoever can figure out how to capture spectacle first in that sense is really going to be able to do that well.
I think we can agree, and I know it's all come across our brains at one point or another, and I know in my case it's definitely been brought up to me multiple times, that the idea of doing a D&D like tournament, because from people who don't know what D&D is and think that it's like competitive and that you're trying to like beat the other players, I think we can all agree that at least within the current state of D&D does not work.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting ask, and I really like the idea of live and spectacle. Like you said, Josh, it's live music is better than music that's recorded. It's just interesting to be there and see it and be a part of it. And theater is so moving, when you're there and watching people do it. And the live shows are so much fun to watch because you get to be a part of it. Like you, just as much as the players are waiting to see how that die, rolls, if they get that 20. And when they do, the cheers from the crowd. And you're doing that with people that are like-minded and in a similar place. I don't think, now this could be wrong, I don't think there are nearly as many people that watch a show on a stream that find themselves cheering audibly as when you're in a live show and you're doing it with all of these other people that are in a similar situation, and it's affecting the players on the screen. So I do think that there's something special about that, and it would be really interesting to see, if that continues to grow and if it takes off.
Certainly would be cool to see a demi-plane show happening at a sold-out esports arena, and it's like, okay, we've got them here, and then you're fist pumping as you're introducing everyone coming out on the stage and getting ready for a show, and cutting graphics and all this loud thumping music, and the beer's flowing and the popcorn's being spilled everywhere and all this stuff. I think, yeah, I could see getting into that. I don't know if you could sustain it on this is like the season, and we're gonna do like games every week at the arena, so make sure you buy your season tickets to watch or something like that. But I did remember my earlier pin from before, which with the mention of Dungeons and Daddies, they did have a football episode when they had to, in the first season, when they had to get the Supper Bowl And then what was it? Will Campos's Henry
Immediate
Oak
groundhog.
character transformed into an animal
Yeah.
and then just flew back and forth across the field to score a bunch of points, which is why it would be like, oh, it's hard to sometimes translate sports into a fantasy setting when people can literally just turn into
Yeah.
earth elementals and do all these wild and crazy powers that would not obey the normal rules of sports in the real world.
Yeah, you'd have to definitely. It's hard to create boundaries, which is a huge part of what sports is. There's a literal boundary on the field. It's hard to create boundaries when you can literally bend space and time as a wizard. Yeah.
Yeah, Strixhaven has a rules for a sport in it, as I recall. So I know that there's stuff out there to do it. It's just a challenge of how do you take the competitive spirit and then give rule sets that let you have somewhat fair competition, because some classes are going to be better suited to things than others, and finding a way to balance it, but also then set up the challenge and premise well is one of the great, I would say, fun things about game design.
Yeah, so that's all the questions I had. So I don't know if you guys have any other questions that have been generated in our conversation that you want to ask each other.
I have a single question that I would like to contribute. And Travis, I'm sure you'll know this because Adam says this probably once a week in team meetings or on streams for us over at Demiplane. Adam Bradford will say that he believes if everyone played tabletop games, the world would be a lot better place. Which to me rings very similar to folks talking about sports building virtue, building character. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts as other folks with experience in both worlds. Do you see parallels there? Similarities? If you had to say, does one build more virtue than the other? What do you think?
I don't know if I can have my children compete like that. I think you're absolutely correct in the idea. Both Adam said, like, his quote of "the world would be a better place if everybody played TTRPG," be able to build those friendships, be around a table and have that experience, because that alone is something that not many people get to experience unless you're at a dinner table, is having hours at a table just talking to each other, and that's basically the whole game. Every once in a while you roll the dice, but you get to have so much enjoyment with your favorite people just by talking in silly voices. That's just crazy. But you're absolutely correct. When families get together, for a beach day, and you're throwing around the frisbee, or you're deciding to play some beach football, there's so much camaraderie in that as well. Just being able to build bonds in spending quality time together, which goes both ways. So yeah, I think you're absolutely correct in both statements that both TTRPG and sports just, I think, create a world that I enjoy living in more than if I didn't get to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the key is not choosing one or the other. It's experiencing both, because they're so different and they both provide such valuable lessons. I find myself very lucky to have been part of both of those, in a high level in both places, because I agree with what Adam says, and I think that the empathy that you learn and practice by role-playing is something that would help anyone in this world. Being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and try and understand a situation different from your own personal perspective. How would this character, who doesn't believe the same things that I believe, how would they understand this? And that's much like, how does my neighbor believe what they believe? And how can I better understand the way that they think so I can interact with them better? Those are great skills to have. And the same thing goes with sports. There's a certain level of sacrifice that goes into it, whether that's I think one of the greatest things about team sports is the shared sacrifice. It's the time that you spend together doing things that no one wants to do, and when you find that adversity together, you come out stronger together. And it's hard to replace that with something that's not in a way that you're put in an adverse situation. And sports are a natural place to find those adversities. Certainly in life, there are far more adversities than just in sports, but it's a great way to find relatively low impact on your life adversities comparatively. I think that the ability to try both and even just dip your toe in the water and understand a little bit, whether that's being on the team and not playing, just seeing the interactions at a practice, or being a manager that's helping out with equipment for doing the video. Being part of the team doesn't necessarily mean that you're the one on the field. It means that you're helping to move the goal forward. And I think the same thing goes the other way. Getting a chance to try it, regardless if you like it and you play it every week from here until forever, or you played it one shot and you thought it was interesting or not, and you're done. You at least tried it, and you got to experience what that was like.
I, for one, am grateful I got to do both.
Same.
I feel like they're both very formative experiences, just perhaps in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, any last questions, or like anyone else got anything else? I'm just trying to think of a good way to end it other than just like, plug in your stuff and like, where we can find all of you and stuff like that.
I think we covered a whole lot in this, and I appreciate your, the platform to be able to kind of talk about it. So thanks, man.
Yeah, not a problem. Trying something new. We've done 100 episodes now, and we'll keep doing episodes, but it's just like, well, what would be a cool way to get like a bunch of guests who I've had before that all have similar spheres of interest or expertise? Maybe they have or have not talked to each other. I know I was talking to my coworker, Catherine, who's had an episode, and I was like, I would love to get you on an art episode with Lauren Walsh. And she was like, oh my gosh, I would have such imposter syndrome being on the same episode as Lauren Walsh.
Right.
But it's like, you're both artists. Like, you both have voices and expertise in the area of art, and I'm sure I would love to sit down and be in the same room as y'all, having a conversation about art and, what it means to life and all that stuff. And so I think that there is a rich guest list that exists for the podcast, and that will continue to grow. And, hopefully people listening to this episode will want to inspire their friends to reach out to try and be on the podcast, or my guests decide like, what, I really like this show and maybe it's, worth something. Maybe I'll recommend someone else to try and be a guest. So then that way I can come back for another one of these parlays and then have like a rich panel style episode with my friend that I recommended or whatever.
Heck yeah.
Absolutely. It's cool.
Yeah, so I guess it sounds like the beers have been drained, and we've reached the natural conclusion of our conversation without it being too forced or anything like that. So if you just want to go around the table and again, just remind us like who you are and where you can be found and what things and passions should we know about.
I'll go first. My name's Travis Frederick. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder at Demiplane, where we do all things tabletop role-playing. Come check us out. You can find us on the web at Demiplane RPG, Around the Horn. You can find me on the web at tfrederick72. And I try to get on as many of these sorts of shows as I can. So you may see me around in other places.
Guess we'll go in order of introduction. My name is Johnny Stanton, Johnny Stanton the Fourth. If you're looking at my social media profile, you can find me at Johnny Stanton IV on whatever new social media site came up with in the meantime before this episode came out. Yeah, hopefully you got to see me at San Diego Comic-Con. I got to do I'm getting to do at this point, a panel with some very cool people on Thursday afternoon. But yeah, and check out the TikTok. Hopefully I didn't just completely lose the thread, and I will actually put out this athletics check show, because I'm very excited about it. It's just the writing of the script is taking a while, but yeah, that's what I've got going on.
I feel you when it comes to writing scripts for short form content.
Yeah.
That is the hardest thing for me to do. I tell you what. I've been Josh Simons, and I will continue to be Josh Simons for the foreseeable future. I am the community manager at Demiplane. Travis has already talked about us, so I'll just say come and join us for our streams on Tuesday mornings and Tuesday evenings at twitch.tv/DemiplaneRPG. I produce all those, so say hi in chat, and I'll say hi back. And you can also join us at Gen Con this year. We will have some of our team members there. So come say hey. We'll be hanging out with some of our publishing partners. More details, of course, will be on all of our social media platforms. Then you can follow me personally on the internet at Joshua M. Simons, or visit my website. It's always under construction, so I apologize for the dust. It's joshuamsimons.com. You can find things that I've published, shows that I've been on, and who knows what else. Occasional blogs, pictures, links. I don't know. It's under construction. Who knows what it's going to look like when it's done.
Wonderful. And just to make sure, because I love shouting it out, you should support Travis's nonprofit of Blocking Hunger, which goes to help out with food insecurity for those in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I'm always happy to give that a shout out, and any of the worthy causes that everyone else in the panel believes in as well.
Yes,
Thank you for having us, Kurt.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Bar to rock on 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.